It is time, right? Ladies and gentlemen, Holy Priest. We're down to 2 healers left to talk about. So 2 healers left. We got Holy Priest and Disc Priest. As you can see, top left of your screen, we did get all the healers. The rating is not indicative of the difficulty of it. It's just kind of how it, how it all played out with if I was already high rated or if I got, got a good win, 6-0 in my last lobby, I'd be higher rated. So with Fist Weaver, I think I ended up getting a 5-1 or a 6-0 in my last game. So, I obviously climb and get more rating from that because I was stopping at 2400 on everything. So if I'm higher than that, it's either because I got lucky with a lobby, got a good win. If I'm barely making the cut, it's because I played Disc Priest, like you see there, 2404, and it was like the hardest struggle to get a win, and I barely made it. So not indicative of the difficulty. But let's get into it. Holy Priest, I think, was probably one of the easier ones. You can see at the top next to the Fist Weaver, the Evoker, and the Monk. The Mistweaver Monk, Holy Priest is pretty similar. It was like on par with, it was basically on par with Mistweaver and Druid in terms of the difficulty. For the most part, it was pretty tame, I would say. Nothing crazy. Sometimes you have lobbies that are rough. I was getting wizard battles, 4-caster lobby against Holy Paladins. And it just came down to being a mega dampener of both teams sitting at the pillar. And some of those lobbies were difficult, but overall, Priest was pretty solid. It didn't really feel like it had any hard counters or anything. Pretty fun to play as well. You do a lot of damage now with this talent. Right here, Burning... I'm not even going to try to pronounce that name because I don't want to get roasted in the chat, but Burning V, That can be taken out of context, the Burning V. Anyways, more Holy Fire damage. You also have Imperial Blaze, which has been this expansion that no one really played before because it wasn't that good, but now it actually pumps because Holy Fire does damage. So 3 instant Holy Fires, no cast, no CD, no mana cost. You have options now for Priest when you're being aggressive, whether it's a stun or whether it's, casting damage or whether it's using your burst or getting a mind control or getting a fear on somebody. You have a few options now, which is really nice when, from my perspective as a healer main, it's nice to be able to have damage as an option as opposed to, okay, the only thing I can do to be aggressive is press my CC on them. So as far as openers go on Priest, the gates are going to open. And if anyone has played Holy Priest at all this patch, we all should know, and just in general with Holy Priest, how it's been for a while, Prayer of Mending is so important. The number one thing that you want to do is just make sure that you're pressing Prayer of Mending as much as you can. Prayer of Mending, you shield, you renew. And now at this point, it kind of depends on what's happening. If your team's running in, they're already taking damage. It's very, very important now that you play Divine Image on Holy Priest, which basically summons the extra Naru statue. You go from Monk. We go from Monk. We're talking about Monk with statues. Now we're talking about Holy Priest with statues. So Divine Image, every time you press a Holy Word spell, you get a statue. You get a Naru statue that copies your spells. So, you Prayer Mending, you shield, you renew. If everyone's running in already and they're taking damage, you can either Serenity, you can either Sanctify and you get a statue down. And also, when you press your Holy Word spells, you have a chance to reset your palm. So you have a chance to reset Prayer Mending whenever you press a Holy Word spell, which is also why it's very important to keep Prayer Mending on cooldown for as much of the game as you can. You want to hit that as much as you can because of that, because you'll randomly get resets of the CD. But once again, you'll have your statue. So an opener, a typical opener would be you palm, you shield, you renew. Everyone's running in. They're going to do their damage. If your teammates are popping their cooldowns, you can press Power Infusion on them. I can't press it on this target apparently, so I'm going to Power Infusion. It'll give it to yourself and your teammate. When things are getting really, really crazy on Priest, what you can do is you can, let's say they're bursting them down with DKCD, Sharpened Blade. You can Guardian, Serenity, Palm. You have a Flash Heal proc. You can heal. So you have a lot of different options for kind of how you want to do this. But typically, pressing Guardian first is really good because if your target obviously doesn't die to Guardian, it's going to reset to 1 minute CD. So if they don't die to the Guardian, it's going to reset to a 1 minute CD instead of a 3 minute. What you can also do is if you're in a position where you're close to your team, and let's say they're also attacking you or you get gripped in by a Death Knight, you can Spirit Form, you can press Divine Hymn, and Divine Hymn now with this talent called Seraphic Crescendo, it's got a lower CD, it channels faster, and the healing bonus lasts longer, on top of having Gales of Song, which makes your Divine Hymn for heal for more. So being able to be in spirit form with Divine Hymn is very big. Also, when you're in spirit form, your spells cost 0 mana. You can't be targeted, you can't be interrupted, nothing can happen to you at all while you're in spirit form. So if you are in that spirit form, because of this talent here, Spirit of the Redeemer, you can kind of free cast and heal your team without having to worry about getting CC'd or interrupted or anything. And you also are using 0 mana in that spell, in that form. So if you're in a position where you're there and you're spamming Flash Heal, you do not have to worry about mana, which makes it very, very efficient and very nice for shuffle. But once again, you know, a lot of words, a lot of complicated talk about CDs. Palm, Shield, Renew. If things are going crazy, people are going ham with their damage, you can press a Sanctify. Now you have an option to, you know, Palm again. You can Guardian Serenity them if they're taking a lot of damage. If your team is getting cleaved down, you can press Spirit and then Divine Hymn. So it kind of depends. Priest is a bit more situational in terms of your opener and your CD usage compared to other healers. So, you know, if your team's getting rotted down to cleave or Death Knight cleave or whatever, you can Spirit Form in him. If your team's dying and they're kind of getting single targeted down by an Arcane Mage or a Hunter or something, you can Guardian Spirit and have Serenities used. But that is pretty much the typical opener, I would say, for Priest, is being able to get your Palm and your Shield out early just for a little bit of extra healing. And then once the game starts, once the fight starts, you have Serenity to proc a statue. You can also proc a statue with your Chastise Stun, which will extend the statue. So a lot of different options. Next up, I would say for Priest, you obviously have a lot of damage like we talked about a few moments ago with your Holy Fire. If you press your Imperial Blaze, your next 3 Holy Fires are going to be instant cast with no mana cost, with no cooldown. Pressing that spell, you get a 30-second buff as well, so you can press it early. So you can, what you can do as well, which I don't really recommend too often because it kind of depends on what's happening in the game, but you can have your standard opener of Palm, Shield, Renew. And if you think that you're going to be able to kind of live the opener pretty quickly and not have to worry about healing for a long period of time, you can also press your Imperial Blaze because it is a 30-second buff. I typically like to use Imperial Blaze either during the enemy go, after it's kind of already started and I've healed my team up, or when the enemy go's finally finished, then I will use it because I don't want to waste it. You know, I don't want to have the entire buff duration go away and not take advantage of the extra Holy Fire because it is a lot of damage. But huge thing on Priest, I would say, outside of, you know, healing and getting your opener down, is you do a ton of damage. So if you're in a position where you have your Imperial Blaze up and you also have a statue down, because for those who don't know, your statue does healing or damage based on what you're casting. So what you can do as well is you can, similar to when we talked about Druid, it kind of depends on what you're doing. If your team is getting CC on the healer, then you can CC the DPS, right? So if your team's already taking care of CCing the healer, you can stun the DPS. And because you have Imperial Blaze and you have your statue, you can cast 3 Holy Fires on top of Chastise, and it's going to do extra damage from your Searing Image. So as you can see, and obviously this is a target dummy, so it's not going to be fully accurate. You got to multiply the number by, you know, 0.85 because people are going to have 15% damage reduction from the verse, whatever. If you look at the damage here, just on the target dummy alone, if you calculate in verse, I'm going to be doing about 340,000 damage, somewhere around there. Don't quote me on that. You know, we got some mathematicians watching this that know all the calculations and everything. You're going to be doing roughly, you know, 330k damage or so once you factor in verse. But think about that. A Chastise, 3 Holy Fires, and then Divine Image damage, you're going to do 330,000 damage. Now, the reason that's important and why it's so good for Shuffle, especially to have these offensive moments, is because in Shuffle, you are going to have these moments of people panicking or dying really fast with cooldowns, especially if you're lining up your damage with your teammates. So if you're doing 340,000 damage, that's no crits, by the way. 0 crits. If you crit a Holy Fire for 90k, that's even more. If you're in combat with a target dummy, so you see my health increase, you're in combat, your health is going to go up. Most people in Arena are going to have between 600,000 health and 700,000 health. So if I'm attacking a target in the opener and I'm doing my damage, Chastise, 3 Holy Fires, and I do 330,000 damage, I'm doing about half of their health myself in, 3 or 4 seconds. So the reason that this is important, once again, is if you're bursting down an enemy with your teammates, you do have a high chance, especially in solo shuffle and especially at lower ratings, just like we talked about with an evoker, you have a chance of winning games in the first 40 seconds of the game just because you're adding additional damage and pressure to that target, which in shuffle, like we talked about, there's not as much coordination. If you're at lower ratings, people aren't going to be as comfortable dealing with burst. So if you can add in 300, 340, 350,000 damage of burst damage to your target in the opening stages of the round, there is a high chance that you can either create enough pressure to win in the first 30 seconds or create enough pressure to where you win the next set of diminishing returns for CC. So very, very important if you are playing a healer that can do damage to kind of get pressure with that. It's very important to take advantage of it. If you're a shaman, if you're a preservation evoker, like we mentioned earlier, if you're a holy priest right now, you are going to have these opportunities to either do damage or get CC that can impact the game. And especially, I can't reiterate it enough, at lower ratings, doing these things is going to help boost you up 200, 300 rating. So if you're 1500, 1600, and let's just assume that you're doing your healing like kind of decent, your healing's somewhat proper, you're rotating spells, you're actively pressing spells, you're not kind of sitting here using one global, waiting 10 seconds, using another global. If you're comfortable with that and you can start incorporating more damage or CC or burst, whatever for whatever healer you're playing into your rotation and into those opening stages of the game, you are going to climb rating. So if you're playing a holy priest and you're playing a round of shuffle and you are able to, at 1600, stun the DPS, spam 3 holy fires on them while your team's bursting them down, there is a good chance that you will climb, 100, 200, 300 rating just off of that specific strategy alone of getting your burst off. So very, very, very important on priest, I would say. Similar to evoker, I think that's one of the number one things you can do to kind of separate yourself. Secondly, and this is going to be a bit more complicated, getting CC is important. Whether or not you're getting a stun on the healer, you heal your teammate once, you press the fear on the healer. Whether or not you're getting a stun into a fear on the healer, or you're stunning the off target into a fear on them while the healer CC, little plays like that. Being active with your CC is going to help a lot as well. And that's something that, once again, word of the day, situational. It's all going to depend on what you're playing, what comp you get that round, what comp the enemy team has, if you're CCing the healer, if your strategy is to CC the DPS. So all of that will impact the decisions that you're going to make. But once you get comfortable with knowing how to get CC out, if you're opting in to play mind control, you can get a mind control randomly on people that are low health. All of these things, unfortunately, I can't give you exact situations of when that's going to happen every single time and when to do it and when not to. But once you figure out your healing opener, you get your burst down, everything else will become a lot easier to understand. So like we talked about, you have your opener of healing, you get your healing out on your teammate, you have your Imperial Blaze up, the game is kind of starting. If the healer can be CC'd and no one else is doing it, you don't have to stun the DPS. You can stun the healer, and then all of a sudden, hey, look, now I'm holy firing DPS. So you can still create pressure different ways. You can either stun the DPS and, spam your holy fires on them. You can stun a healer, spam your holy fires on the DPS. If your team wants to swap the healer, I mean, why not? If you have power infusion up and your team's doing cleave damage to everyone, you can stun the healer and kill them with your holy fires because you're still going to do about half their health with that, which is going to obviously create a lot of panic and just pure chaos for the enemy team. So holy priest, pretty simple. You have your standard opener, you have your palm up, you have your renew and your shield. Which shield you don't want to spam too early, but sometimes it is good to do. You can get a sanctify early. You can try to Guardian Serenity early. Keep spamming Palm as much as you possibly can. Make sure you power infusion your DPS. If your team's getting bursted down heavy and it's cleave damage, or let's say you already pressed Serenity, or you haven't Serenity'd yet, you can go into Spirit form, press Divine Hymn. So a couple options there. Situational, depends on the damage you're taking, whether it's single target or not. But what Holy Priest is going to come down to is pressing your palm as much as you can, making sure you're pressing your Holy Word spells to reset your palm CD, and managing your charges of Serenity. So in terms of healing, that's kind of what it comes down to. So you're going to end up doing that with your healing rotation while rotating your spirit, your guardian spirit, your spirit form with Divine Hymn. You can apotheosis if you're out of charges and be able to spam that more. When we talked about your CC and your damage, pretty simple. You get 3 Holy Fires from Imperial Blaze. Does a ton of damage. So if you can incorporate that into your opener and help your team out with damage, I guarantee that you're going to create a lot of pressure, and you're going to have opportunities or create opportunities to kind of win games faster in Shuffle than you were before. The only other tip I would say for Shuffle that I think is very, very important, especially because we know that our teammates do not press defensive CDs in Shuffle. You know, shout out to all the healers out there. We know how it is. If you see that your teammates are dying, or let's say the opener happens and they press their CDs, because you're not really worried about mana, you are able to use your Symbol of Hope earlier than most people do. So that's one thing that I think will help a lot as well with kind of surviving in solo Shuffle is, you know, let's say you're playing with a Demo Warlock and a Boomkin, okay? It's important to remember what spells Symbol of Hope resets. So for a Demo Lock and a Boomkin, Symbol of Hope is going to reset Barkskin, and it's going to reset Unending Resolve, so the Warlock's wall. So if you're queuing Shuffle, the enemy team runs in, your Warlock decides not to port. He says, why not? Screw it. It doesn't matter that I can just press port. I'm going to tank everything, and I'm going to face these people head on and just press wall. So what you can do is after you live the opener, you know, you have your healing out, you press all your CDs, you're going crazy, you're pressing Serenities, you're pressing Power Word Life, you're healing through everything like crazy. Once you have time to breathe, what you can do is you can just Symbol of Hope, and you'll take about a minute CD off of his wall if you can cast the whole thing. So once you have time to breathe, your team is stable. It's always important to look for those defensives of your teammates, because you can actually reset the cooldown of it faster than it normally would. So same thing with a Druid. Barkskin's a minute cooldown. If they Barkskin the opener, the second you have room to breathe and you're kind of stable, you can actually reset his Barkskin. Let's say 10 seconds after you reset his Barkskin, he normally wouldn't have it back yet, but because you decide to press Symbol of Hope, he'll have it back. He gets stunned, he presses Barkskin again. So, or at least we can hope, because we know that, you know. Oh, that's a good pun, actually. Symbol of Hope. We can hope they press their defensives. There you go. Obviously, we know that people might not be paying attention to it if you're going to reset their Barkskin like that, but you definitely can hope that they will notice. And if they get stunned again 10, 20, 30 seconds later, when they normally wouldn't have it, they can actually press Barkskin again. So very important to do that as well in Shuffle, especially. Even in 2s and 3 and 2v2 and 3v3, if that's where you're going to play, it's still a good thing to understand and know that you can reset defensives. But in Shuffle, I think it'll help a lot as well. So with that being said, I think it's time to move on to the most challenging healer for Shuffle. All right, here we go. First off, I want to say this healer was easily, you can see how many games I played. I played 640 rounds of Shuffle, which I think is like 2.5 or 3 times more than the next highest amount of rounds I played to push rating in Shuffle on a healer. So it was quite the journey for sure. Quite the journey. Very frustrating. It made me a very angry person. I will not deny it. I had a lot of very, very angry moments playing Disc Priest, but it is unfortunate because Disc Priest is one of my favorite healers to play. Unfortunately, it's just not that good at the moment. You can still do well with it. You know, lower ratings, Disc Priest is really popular still. So you can still do well with it, but it is going to be a healer that is very, very frustrating to play. A lot of it is going to come down to just kind of outlast teams because, you know, you don't really have as much healing as other healers. You don't have as much damage, I would say, as other healers either. So a lot of the game comes down to a mix of trying to outlast them while also trying to be very aggressive with CC. So being able to press your Psychic Scream as much as you can is very important. Being able to rotate through your Pain Suppression, your Rapture, your Power Word Barrier, your Life Swap, all of those things are very important as well. But for the most part, Priest, fair warning, it's going to feel like sometimes you play really well and you might lose anyways, but that's just kind of how it is. And you just have to, you know, stay motivated and stay positive about it. But let's get it down. Let's break it down. So Holy Priest, you win games by keeping up your dot, your shield uptime, and obviously making sure that if you have your dot up, you're getting good atonement healing, making sure that you're rotating through your CDs, your cooldowns with your Pain Suppression, your rapture, your barrier, saving life swap, in my opinion. I think if you can save that for deep dampening moments, it's very, very good. Very, 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 very beneficial, just like we talked about with Shaman and Spirit Link. So that's kind of the gist of it. You're going to try to keep up your dot. You're going to make sure you're spamming shield. You're going to, try to radiance, but not spam it too much because you don't want to while also rotating through your cooldowns, while also trying to land fear. You don't want to push in all the time for it, especially if you're fighting, I don't know, a Pally or something, right? You're fighting a Holy Pally. The Paladin still has Hammer of Justice. And you decide, you know what? I'm pissed off. And you run in and he presses Hammer of Justice on you. And then he presses Blinding Light on you. So similar to other healers, we talked about Monk, and just in general, it's going to be situational. You're going to have to find those moments and those opportunities to push in and get CC. But typically on Priest, if you can keep up your dot, do a little bit of sustained damage with Penance and Mind Blast, rotate through your CDs. And if you're even able to get fears on the healer, even just a couple fears in the game, it's going to help you a lot more than if you're staying back trying to PvE heal like you're on a Mistweaver. So as far as Priest goes, opener wise, pretty simple. A lot of it's coming down to shield. You can see that I have Prayer Mending as well. So I think Prayer Mending is actually not that bad in Shuffle on Disc Priest, just because, and the reason I say Shuffle only is because it's a lot different when you play 2v2 and 3v3, more coordination and stuff. You can do things that kind of make it so you don't need as much healing. But when you're playing Shuffle, all the healing you can get is going to be beneficial. I found it beneficial during my journey with Disc Priest. So could be anecdotal, but I do think it is good. Opener for you would be, you press shield, you press renew, because for those who don't know, you have this talent here called Train of Thought. So every time you flash heal, which you get from your procs or casting, and every time you renew, you get a lower CD on your power word shield by 1 second. So typical opener, you obviously want to have Atonement up. So what you're going to do most of the time is you're going to shield one person, the main target. You're going to press power word shield on them. You're either going to renew the off target. So like, let's say you're playing Jungle Glaive, Hunter Feral. You're going to shield the Hunter or whoever you think is going to take damage first. You're going to target the Feral, renew the Feral. That's going to reset the CD of your shield. And then you can palm the Feral and then renew him as well. Or you can Prayer of Mending the Hunter and then wait to save your shield for the Hunter again if he decides to take damage. So pretty simple opener. You shield, target the other guy, renew. You can also back-to-back renew as well. But once again, depends on if you're worried about mana. So I would say standard opener, if you're going to be kind of concerned about mana, you shield one guy, you renew the other guy, you press palm, and then when shield comes back up, if he's already taking damage, you can shield again. And then, very, very, very important, what you're able to do as well is you have this talent here called Wheel and Woe. So your shield is going to be buffed by your Penance Bolts. So your Penance Bolts are going to give you a buff that give you more absorb on your shield. So what I like to do, you can either Penance first, so you can get a shield buff, and then shield, and then renew your target, and then you can save your shield for your other teammate. Or what I like to do, and what I think is better most of the time, just so you can already get your Purge the Wicked dot, which is your Shadow Word Pain, just so you can get this going and get this spread onto targets and have more Atonement healing, is I would shield, renew, press palm, target the enemy that's running in, press my Penance, and boom. I already have multiple dots out. I'm getting Atonement healing right now. You can see the numbers pop up. I'm getting some Atonement healing. And now I also have a shield buff for my next power word shield because of Wheel and Woe. So typical opener, I would say, once again, reiterate it, shield, renew off target, palm main target. If the if the game is already starting, the DPS are engaging from the enemy team, you can put a dot on them. You can spread your dot with Penance, and then you're back to pressing shield. This is where it gets tricky, and I think this is going to be the hardest part for people to learn on Disc Priest. Disc Priest doesn't have the healing output that other healers do. So to survive in solo shuffle, you're going to rely on your damage reduction spells, which are Pain Suppression and Powered Barriers. So if you are fighting a team that has a lot of cleave damage, you're fighting a DK or like an Arms Warrior running in with their Blade Storm, or you're fighting a Affliction Lock that's popping all their cooldowns, or the Shadow Priest popping all their cooldowns and has a lot of dots, or a Boomkin, and everyone's kind of stacked and eating damage together, it is good and it is not bad. It's not that bad to do to press barrier as fast as you can if your team is stacked up and you're sitting in the barrier. Now, before people watch this and they start typing in the comments, oh my God, I press barrier and people run out. This is terrible advice. Unfortunately, you cannot control your opponent, your teammates. It happens to the best of us. You're going to barrier, they're just going to run out immediately. For the most part, it's very, very good to try and barrier instantly if your team is taking a lot of cleave damage, a lot of AoE damage. If your team is dying where it's one person dying mainly, so, you know, once again, you have a DK that's getting run down by a hunter or a feral, your DK is getting run down. Because you have this talent here, Protector of the Frail, every time you shield, which is also why it's important to have really good shield uptime and why it's good to spam shield as much as you can. Every time you press powered shield, which you get from Rapture as well, that you get extra benefit from that, your pain suppression gets lowered by 3 seconds. So what that means is if only one person is dying and you're having an opener of, you know, your DK getting bursted down, what you can do to help give yourself more cooldowns later in the game is you can pain suppression first. You know, you can shield again, get your healing out like normal. And if you have to, and once again, it's the same thing, situational, I know, I keep saying it, you can also Rapture. So if you use your first pain sup and your team is still dying, you press your Radiance, you press shield, your team's still dying, you can Rapture and you can spam shield. You can spam shield on your teammate, you can spam shield on your other teammate, you can spam shield on yourself. Spam shield as much as you can to get as much added benefit of that 3-second reduction on CD for pain suppression during your Rapture. Because if you Rapture and you get, let's say, 30 seconds extra off your pain suppression, then that is going to help you so much in the next, 90 seconds to 2 minutes when the game is getting a lot crazier and dampening's kicking in, if you can get a third pain suppression. Because as you see, Rapture's been on CD for 45 seconds now. I've got 1 minute and 30 seconds left on my next pain sup. And what I can do is I can shield, renew myself, shield again. I'm getting closer and closer to my next pain suppression. So very, very important to have as much shield uptime as possible on Disc Priest. Obviously, mana is a concern. Definitely have to worry about your mana. But if you're able to shield and renew a lot, or shield and you get flash shield procs from that, just to lower the CD of your shield, it's very, very important. Because the faster you get to that pain sup, the better it is going to be for your team when dampening is kicking in and your healing is starting to feel like it's doing nothing on Disc Priest, which happens pretty much every shuffle. You are going to be able to have another pain suppression soon. So as you guys can see, my pain suppression's already almost there. So another shield. Flash shield myself. Give another shield. Boom. I have another pain suppression back. So now in the span of 2 minutes, I've had 3 pain suppressions. And that is going to be something that's going to help separate yourself in the solo shuffle against other healers if you're able to actually extend the game that long on a Disc Priest by getting more pain suppressions. So very, very important to have shield uptime. Another thing I want to say is when it comes to defensive cooldowns of Disc Priest, I think it is very, very important, much like Shaman when we talked about Spirit Link. If you have to, and you have to panic, void swap somebody, void shift somebody, life swap, whatever you want to call it, if you have to void shift them in the first 30 seconds of the game, you have no choice but to do it. That's fine. Don't freak out. Don't panic. But I definitely think it's important to make sure that you're trying to save void shift for as long as you can. Once you get to that, I would say 30% dampening mark on Disc Priest, it feels like the game is going to end at any second. So if you're getting to 30, 35, 40, 45% dampening on a Disc Priest, and you still have void shift available, or even better, you still have trinket void shift available, you can use that as your last second cooldown to win the game. So let's say your team's dying, your team's, look at this, 1 HP, right? 1 HP, he's dying. Let's say we're at 50% health or 50% dampening. The enemy team's all at 20, 30, 40%. They're almost dead. They're about to die. You trinket, you can void shift. And now if you void shift this target here, he's now full health. You're obviously lower, assuming that you kept yourself full health for this game. And now that'll give you an extra few seconds to survive that amount of dampening and win the game. So it doesn't seem like much, like, oh yeah, pressure cooldown, sure. But if you can save cooldowns like this that don't get affected by dampening because it's based on health percentage and it redistributes health as opposed to actually providing healing, so that means you're getting the full benefit. So no matter what's going on, if you're full HP and you void shift somebody that's low health in dampening, they're going to go to full health. So it's very, very, very important to make sure that if it's possible, you end up saving this cooldown for later in the game, just so you have a guaranteed save for your teammate in dampening. Now, with that being said, I don't want you guys to queue up Arena and lose the game without pressing Void Shift and go, well, you said not to press it. No. If you have to press Void Shift and it's, 45 seconds into the game and you have no choice but to do it, or you're going to lose, then press Void Shift. Like, it happens. You're going to have to use CDs the way you don't want to sometimes. If that's what's going to help you survive that round, then do it. But if it is possible, and it is going to take a lot of work and practice, saving your Void Shift for later in the game is huge, huge for pushing rating on Priest. And I would say, honestly, that's really about it. There's really nothing crazy you can do, I think, on Disc Priest and Shuffle. If you play Mind Control, that's good. I didn't play Mind Control at all. A lot of it is just keeping up good shield uptime, making sure that you have your dot spread. And another big thing, too, is playing Shadowy Covenant. Shadowy Covenant's really good. It basically just turns your spells, your Penance, into a shadow spell, amongst other spells. Penance and Solace, I believe, into shadow spells. So if you're dealing with a lot of interrupts, you can Shadowy Covenant and press your Penance, and it's a shadow spell. So if you get locked out on this, you can still cast Flash Heal, you can still cast Shield. So being able to make use of Shadowy Covenant is important. It also buffs your shadow spells to do 25% more damage and healing. So it is a nice modifier to have on your Penance if you're deciding to, Penance for damage. Let's say you're going to Penance for healing. That is another option as well, to be able to kind of rotate through your Shadowy Covenant. And then you can Penance this target, and now you have a stronger Penance because of that. So aside from that, aside from Shadowy Covenant usage, and aside from keeping good uptime on your dot, spamming shield, radiancing, rotating your CDs, there's nothing really crazy you can do. You can go for CC and go for Fierce. You can obviously purge a lot against certain teams. But for the most part, what's gonna happen on Disc Priest is you're gonna have to rotate your defensives, rotate your damage reduction spells to try to get to that later stage of the game, especially if you're trying to be really aggressive. If you can rotate through those spells and kind of stay on top of people while saving your Void Shift for deep dampening, while keeping up your dot, trying to push in for fears if people are close to you, that's what's gonna help win you the game. But overall, there's nothing crazy you can do, I would say. You can't do anything crazy with like a static field movement or something on Shaman. You can't spam CC people like you can on Druid. So a lot of it comes down to rotating those defensive cooldowns, those damage mitigations, being able to try to land your fear as much as you can while adding in a little bit of extra damage with your Penance and your dot. If you can do that, I think you will climb. Once again, before I started Disc Priest, before we start our Disc Priest talk, it is going to be very frustrating to play, but it is fun. It is fun. If you can deal with the frustration, you're going to have moments where it feels like you're playing super well and you're kind of losing anyways. That's just kind of how it goes when you're playing a healer that's not the best. And that's pretty much all it is on Priest. You spam shield on cooldown. You try to reset the CD of your shield as much as you can. Try to Penance a lot to either spread your dot or get a buff of your shield from Wheel and Woe, which you can also use Shadowy Covenant to enhance that and deal with interrupts better. Palm as much as you can as well. If you can't press shield, you want to press palm because it is going to give you extra healing, which is definitely helpful in solo shuffle. And when it comes to being offensive, a lot of it just comes down to kind of casting on targets with either Mind Blast, or obviously you can Penance on them. And if the healer is ever in a spot where you can run to them and fear them, or if the DPS are close and you can kind of triple fear the team if they're stacking, then you can run up and get a fear. But aside from that, you rotate your defensives, you spam shield as much as you possibly can to try to reset pain suppression more. And I think if you can do that well, and you can try to get better at that with shield uptime and keeping up your dot, trying to land as many fears as you can, saving Void Shift for dampening, I think you will climb on Priest. It's going to be a rough battle. It's going to be a journey for sure, but it is possible. Anything's possible, people. Just like Kevin Garnett said, it's all possible. Guess what? I got it done. It took me 600 plus rounds, but I got it done. And it was miserable every step of the way, but I got it done. I got it done for sure. Closing statement. This was just a quick overview talking about my experience on all the healers, You know, I pushed every single healer to 2400 in solo shuffle. So just talking about my experience on it, difficulty of all the healers. I would say a few tips and tricks on what you can do, what can kind of help you climb rating and shuffle as well as the purpose of this video, purpose of the whole breakdown. So if this video helps, that's awesome. Especially let me know in the comments. That'd be awesome. You know, you can comment on the video, like, subscribe to the channel, comment if it's helped you, comment if it doesn't. I mean, it should. Come on. We should be honest. It should help. If it doesn't help you, I'm sorry. I will try again another time. Being a healer is rough. You know, we need more healers in the game. And that's about it. So appreciate it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video and thank you for watching.